The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Wow.
What's up?
I just bought and financed a car through Carvana in minutes.
You? The person who agonized 4 weeks over whether to paint your walls eggshell or off-white bought and financed a car in minutes?
They made it easy. Transparent terms, customizable down and monthly. Didn't even have to do any paperwork.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Hey, have you checked out that spreadsheet I sent you for our dinner options?
Finance your car with Carvana and experience total control. Financing subject to credit approval.
Amateur Traveler, episode 928. Today we talk about a bucket list destination with llamas, colonial cities, guinea pigs, and Incan ruins as we go to Machu Picchu in Peru. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Peru. I'd like to welcome to the show Michael from Rochester, New York, who has not come to talk to us about Rochester, New York, but about Machu Picchu and Peru. Michael, welcome to the show.
Good to be here and finally to speak with you, Chris. I admire your work and I look forward to having this conversation. Thank you very much.
And you know how we play our game. You're a listener of this show. I feel like this is a stupid question, but why should someone go to Machu Picchu?
I'm going to tell you why I wanted to go to Machu Picchu first. As I have to say, probably a fifth grade student, it was just one of those iconic historical places that I recall from my childhood. Always saying, I'm going to go there someday, like the Colosseum in Rome and the Giza Plateau.
Which is next year's trip, I understand.
So. It is next year's trip. It is in the planning right now. Yes, it is. I wanted to wait until the gem was opened before we went there. Yeah. But anyway, this is on my bucket list A. And Giza will complete that list next year. But if you're into history, if you're into when I was a child learning about the Mesoamerica cultures, I have done several of the Mayan ruins. I have gone through the Sacred Valley. And in a couple of years, I'm going to follow your advice about Oaxaca and Mexico City. Mm-hmm. And that will be another trip of ours so that I can complete that Mesoamerica trifecta. But Peru in general, just an amazing, magical country. I can't say enough about my trip. In the 30 plus countries that my wife and I have traveled to, I would have to say that this is still in the top three. And I don't think that's going to change. We were there for a couple of weeks, so we had more than enough time to explore the Sacred Valley. We spent a few days in Lima, Cusco, and a couple of other places. But to condense it down to a week is possible, but you do have to have some travel time on either side of that week.
Yep.
Yeah, it isn't the type of location that you could just jump into and in and out. Marrakesh, somewhere like that. If you're coming from Europe, you can jump in there for a few days and then depart. But if you're going to make the effort, and this is a once in a lifetime trip, and that's how we see our vacations. Oftentimes when we choose a destination such as Peru, our intent is to go there, visit a few places, really explore the tapestry of fabric, of what's available, with the anticipation that we're probably not going to go back again with so many other options to see. So this was a bucket list for myself. Not as much my wife. She gives me administrative license to go ahead and plan these trips. And as a career teacher, I'm retired now, planning a trip a field trip is nothing new to me. And so I do spend about 8 months in preparation for the trip, and certainly going to Peru. And I will say Peru because it's just so much more than Machu Picchu. With Machu Picchu being one of the many highlights
Right.
there, you really have to put a lot of time into it. You really have to mind, body, and soul. You are ready for this trip and everything that is there, because you will experience so much more, from the breathtaking vistas to the people to the food, the music, the idyllic settings, and then the frosting on the cake is Machu Picchu.
Let's jump into your itinerary here.
Okay.
Don't keep me waiting here with building it up. Where are we going to start?
Okay, preface to starting. What you want to really take into consideration when going to Machu Picchu or going to Peru, as well as going to Ecuador, is the altitude, because that really can play into the success or failure of your trip. And when I was planning my trip, I knew that we were not going to go to Machu Picchu from Cusco, because Cusco is the highest elevation.
Right.
So what we decided to do was to go into Lima, which all international flights have to go into Lima, and which virtually there is no elevation there. I think it's about 300 feet, which is almost like being at the highest point in the state of Florida. So there is no issue there, but you're going to have some jet lag. So your first day, you're going to want to fly into Lima and not catch an immediate flight to Cusco, because if you stay in Cusco first, you're at your trip's highest elevation. And that is where you do not want to start, because it's going to take you 2 to 3 days to acclimatize. And for anybody who hasn't been to Denver or to a location that has a higher altitude, it really takes a toll on your body. And I have several tips to anticipate prior and plan in altitude preparedness prior to your trip. But
Well, and you mentioned Denver. This is twice as high
exactly.
from sea level. It's 2 miles up instead of 1
Right.
mile up. Yeah.
And anybody who's a sports fan or an athlete knows that if there's any competition or a football game in Denver, Mile High Stadium, the opposing team always complains about not having that wind and needing to get there early to prepare. And this is no different, because Machu Picchu is your Super Bowl. So you definitely want to be prepared and ready for. You don't want to miss that aspect, because if you're traveling 4,000 miles, and it's not difficult to get to Aguas Calientes, where Machu Picchu is, but it does take planning, and there are several steps. And if you're not feeling well, those steps are just going to compound, and you're not going to have the experience of a lifetime, which everybody should have there. Cusco's elevation is just over 11,000 feet,
Right.
and Machu Picchu is just over 8,000 feet. So you can't start at Machu Picchu, but the smart thing that we did, which I put the time into it, I read blogs, I looked at what people had to offer, and they suggested starting at a lower elevation. So it's that first day we started in Lima, actually Miraflores, and then we travel on to the Sacred Valley, which I'll get to. But so my first day is going to be in Lima, specifically the Miraflores district of Lima. And I would say that there wasn't much for us to see in Lima. We stayed there for 2 or 3 days in Miraflores, because there was just enough for us to ease into the trip after the jet lag, and we wanted to spend a couple of days there to see the city. But my wife and I have been to several Spanish colonial cities, and when we went to downtown Lima, the second day we were there, we just felt it wasn't worth our time. They have the Grand Plaza there, and that was worth a visit, but it was so similar to what we've seen before. And yes, it was the site for a lot of the Spanish Inquisition activities you submit, or what your outcome is going to be. Many of the beautiful churches and grand buildings are built on original Inca stonework, and you can even see some of that as foundations to the building. But is it worth a day in Lima? I don't think so, if you have been to other cities that are similar. And Cusco is also going to offer you that Spanish colonial architecture, museums, churches, markets, everything. So I would suggest, if you have a week in Peru that you go to Miraflores. The bougie area, it's where Peruvians with means choose to live in the Lima area. Wonderful place for foodies, restaurants, fantastic boutique hotels, and they have the Malecon that you can walk for
Mhm.
several miles, which is on the cliff of the Pacific Ocean. And they still refer to it as Lima, but the district is Miraflores. Wonderful places to stroll and get rid of that jet lag and prepare for the next leg of your trip. And that's why I suggest staying there for a day, because you can get up at
Mhm.
your ease, have breakfast after a long day of travel, and then go out, walk, get a little exercise in, because your next day is going to include some travel.
Before we leave Miraflores, you mentioned eating and you mentioned staying in boutique hotels. Do you have any particular recommendations on either one?
I don't. The boutique hotel we stayed in was nice, and I probably would stay there again. However, it's the type of location where if you were to access Booking.com or whatever or agency you use, there's a multitude of places
Okay.
and they tend to be mid-range to high-end in Miraflores. So there's no issue at all with securing a very decent place to stay.
Mhm.
Interesting thing is when we landed in Lima, it's about a 45-minute taxi drive to Miraflores, and it is a developing country, but we weren't prepared for the fact that the power grid was going to completely go out in Lima as we were driving in our taxi from the airport to Miraflores. And my wife turned to me and said, "Where are you taking me?" Everything was pitch black, and we arrived at night. So we were just a little unsettled, but once we got closer to Miraflores, very much like a European suburb, a U.S. city, all the modern conveniences and everything that you can imagine. A really nice way to start your trip. We went to the
Okay.
Parque del Amor, which is an iconic location there to walk on the Malecon. And then we spent the latter part of the day in a neighborhood that's adjacent to Miraflores, which is called Barranco. And Barranco is a hip neighborhood, a lot of street art, artsy, funky, great vibe, and there's enough to do and eat. Certainly, there are restaurants. It isn't as, I would say, upscale as Miraflores can be with
Okay.
their high rises and everything, but a very comfortable area to take a taxi in. It's only about 5 minutes away by taxi. We walked, and it ended up being several miles. But there's an iconic place there called Isolina, and that would be my recommendation to eat because that'll be your first introduction to authentic Peruvian food. And the chef who works and owns the restaurant named it after his mother. But Isolina is the name of the restaurant. And that was a very nice way to start in preparation for the next day because the next day is your flight to Cusco.
Okay. And you say Peruvian food, anything that stands out for you from your Peruvian food experience?
There's a lot of comfort food. Like any other major metropolitan city, you could find anything from American fare to Indian cuisine. But when you talk about Peruvian food, you're looking at a lot of comfort food, especially when you're talking about indigenous ingredients. And when you're
Mhm.
talking about a lot of foods include quinoa, potato, there is some rice, but more quinoa mixed in, a lot of soups, stews, and they use a variety of proteins. Now, my wife and I are, I'll say, near veggies because we do have seafood on occasion.
Okay.
And I did break my 10-year streak there because when in Cusco, so I'll explain that later. But you can find anything you want to eat, but the food tends to be comfort food, traditional foods, sauces, stews, soups,
Protein
including
and a starch is what I'm hearing.
yeah. And their maize or their corn is very interesting because it's not like the sweet corn that we have here in the States.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, a variety, probably. I think I stopped counting, just like potatoes. I never knew there were so many variety
Yeah,
of
I
and
remember that from
colors.
when we talked about Peru before.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Corn is no different. That's a staple there. And some of it is large, some of it's the size of your pinky, very large kernels for some are the little fingerlings you'll find in soup, but very interesting. And if you have a chance to taste one of the potato or cheese soups, then I definitely would suggest that. Typically, when we travel, we stay away from any restaurants that are brands, and we will ask for recommendations from our hotel, but oftentimes they'll send you, everybody has a connection. They'll send you to a place and they're getting a piece of the action if they're sending their patrons there. And oftentimes it can be a touristy place. The rule of thumb, you don't eat on the square, you eat a couple blocks off of the square. And so we will ask employees of our hotel or Riyadh or wherever we've been for where they would go and where they eat.
Yeah.
And then we take that recommendation, and oftentimes eating at a very local place that's owned by locals, run by locals, and serves locals, you're going to get the most authentic food.
Excellent. You were going to take us on a flight next before I
Yeah. Okay.
interrupted.
So your next morning, so now you are rested, you got a little flavor, your jet lag is over with. You are going to take a flight to Cusco. And I suggest taking an earlier flight. So you're going to have to drive into Lima. If you arrive the night before and you want to go to Cusco the next day, stay at an airport hotel in Lima. If you're going to bypass my suggestion to go to Miraflores, if you're going to jump right into it, which a lot of people do, I would suggest you don't, because you just want that day to relax and gear up. So that next morning, you're going to fly to Cusco, which is a couple-hour flight. Very easy thing to do. Try to get a window seat would be a tip. If you fly over the Rainbow Mountains, and that you're actually going to see the topography of the Andes is very interesting to see, because what you're seeing is before you get to the rainforest. So you're going to see, it's like flying over the Rockies. You're going to, or even Nevada, and that you're going to see Red Rock Mountains and just interesting topography. And my suggestion is to, as soon as you land, go through customs, which is very quick in Cusco. You get on a colectivo and you go directly to Ollantaytambo. And it looks like Ollantaytambo, but it's the double L in Spanish, just how they pronounce llama is llama. Ollantaytambo is a small city in the Sacred Valley. Now, this is where the elevation is going to benefit you, because it's a lower elevation than Cusco. So this will prepare you for Machu Picchu. More importantly, it'll prepare you for your return to Cusco, where you're going to spend the remainder of your trip. So as soon as we landed, and we stayed at a boutique hotel, and I'm only going to say it's a boutique hotel just because I think they had maybe 8 rooms. And it's just a really tiny hotel. Ollantaytambo is probably one of our favorite aspects of our trip. It is the last stop on the train before you get to Aguas Calientes. So if you were to choose to take the train from Cusco, you're going to go to Ollantaytambo. And I'm just going to call it Ollanta just to make it simple, because I'm going to refer to it several times, and it's a mouthful.
And you mentioned taking a collectivo. So you meant what that is a collective taxi, right? Private taxi.
And it was booked through our hotel. And that's something that we often do too. When we go to a country where we have never been, we usually secure our transport through the hotel. And it's one of the first things I'll ask when I make a booking, about being picked up from the airport. They'll wait for you with a little paper with your name on it, versus haggling. Anybody who's been to a Latin American country, you know what the taxi queue looks like. Walking out, hundreds of people calling out for you. But if you have someone with your name, you feel safe, especially if you're getting in at night. You have a driver that's waiting for you. It's a secure passage that's arranged from your hotel. So that's what we did. And we had a driver waiting for us at the airport in Cusco. We went through security, got our bags, and went right into this colectivo, because it's about 2 hours from Cusco to Ollantaytambo. It's interesting because you're driving through the Sacred Valley at this point. There are places to stop. And like anybody who is involved in tourism, they stop at a place and they show you some women weaving. There's always an opportunity for you to spend some money as a tourist. And I think everybody has a hand in it, which I admire, because they work together as a community. And they show you how they get the dye from certain plants. And what is it, the cochinilla, the
bug on the
beetle.
cactus? Yeah.
And they pinch it in their hands and show you, which is interesting. And then buy a little trinket, and then a bathroom break, and then you move on to Ollanta. I'm going to say it's easier. I guess the reason also for going there, it is a remarkable town. I once read that it was let me see if I can say this correctly, the oldest continuously inhabited city in the Western Hemisphere. And what you see there in terms of architecture, because so many people, they focus on Pisac, Machu Picchu, other Incan ruins.
Right.
There are ruins, which was the Ollantaytambo fortress right in this small town. And anywhere you're staying, you are looking at this complete intact fortress, Incan ruins, 600-700 years ago, original stonework. It's amazing to look out. One of my best memories was waking up, hearing Peruvian music, and across this little valley looking at this fortress. It just felt like I was teleported. It was just amazing because all of a sudden you're there. There's no McDonald's, there's none of that. You are completely out of that tourist element. And the little village itself, and it is a small village, all original stonework. The roads are original, the buildings are original, and even the irrigation canals in the middle of some of them are still in use. People collecting water and washing laundry. And I know that you've discussed this before about the Incan architecture, but it really gives you an up close and personal opportunity to see the stonework and how it existed, how there's no mortar, and how brilliantly it was developed because it sits on a couple of fault lines, Sacred Valley.
Right.
And when there is seismic activity, those stones are meant to shift and wobble back and forth enough, but there's no mortar, so there's no breaking or cracking. And some of them weigh tons. They did not have the use of the wheel. They did not have iron tools. It is just such an impressive sight to see and be a part of, to see this original architecture and people still there using it and living in it in this tiny town. They have a little square, every little local restaurants, and I have a wonderful recommendation for a restaurant.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
But the hostel I stayed at was called Hostel Iskay, Iskay. Small, very personable, wonderful, catered to us, took care of our transportation. When we went to Aguascalientes, we had to come back through Ollantaytambo instead of going directly to Cusco. They stored our luggage for us. But you are going to see people there. That's when you really get your first glimpse of the Quechua, the indigenous peoples that live in the Andes Mountains, who will traverse 4 to 5 hours with an alpaca or walking to bring their things to the market that they also have there. So the local market is fun. But Chris, you get to wake up, have breakfast while you're staring at an Incan fortress. Mm-hmm. And then you get to walk over there before any tours come, and you can walk around it. It's not like the US where everything's cordoned off and you can't step on anything. You can walk up, and you really want to take your time that first day if you have the opportunity. And that's why I suggest spending 2 days there. Most people stop off there for a half day and you miss it. There's so much to see in this small town because it's like taking the authenticity of Cusco and condensing it down into a hand-sized version for you, and where it's less touristy, but so authentic. And
well, and you say see the town before the tourists come, so I'm gathering a lot of people then are doing a day tour from
they are.
Cusco. So they're going to come in at something like 10 o'clock, 10:30 or so.
That's what I would say. We noticed it from like noon after, because it is a couple hours away. And usually people hit the market first before they go to the ruins anyways. I would definitely, actually, the first day, if you can afford to have that first day, walk around first, because if we want to spend a couple minutes talking about the altitude, now's a good time.
Yep.
You will wake up, and if you're walking a flight of stairs or even walking down to the main square, you actually will stop and you're catching your breath and everything is labored to the point to where you're thinking, I thought I was in pretty good shape. Now walking a block, I'm really struggling here, and you'll start to notice it.
Yeah, so this is about 9,000 feet. I remember at 11,000 feet doing a quarter mile nature hike. And as short as that sounds, I remember how many times we had to stop and catch our breath.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's you don't appreciate it
Yeah.
until you actually live it. And so a couple of tips on that. When you do your research, my wife and I decided to take Diamox. I don't know if you've done
Yep.
that before.
I
Okay.
have
All right.
not.
So you know. Oh, okay. So and the trick is you take it, it's a prescription, and you consult your doctor, obviously, for everything. But what worked for us, seeing that this was our first high altitude trip, and I just didn't want anything to get in the way of me missing Machu Picchu. You go on it a couple days ahead of time, and then you take one pill a day for 10 days until after your descent. So it's before the ascent and after the descent. We
Hmm.
noticed tingly fingers and tingly toes
I've
was
heard
the
that.
only
Yeah.
side effect, but it's supposed to quell the effects of immediate immersion into high altitude. My wife did not take Diamox when we went a few years ago to Quito and paid
Okay.
dearly for it. But
Uh,
anyway, hydrating is what you want to do. I can't say that enough to combat the ill effects of altitude. When you get to Miraflores, even on your flight, you are drinking water. Reduce the amount of coffee, reduce the amount of alcohol. If enjoying your trip and having safe passage through is important to you, then you can wait for your celebratory beer or glass of
mhm.
wine. You really can. Just focus on what's most important. And that preparedness is what will benefit you in the end. So when you're in your first day in Ollantaytambo, take your time walking around. I would suggest having that second day there so that you can do the Inca ruins the
Okay.
second day, because that's when you're going to be able to take your time and walk up there without feeling the drastic effects. If you try to do everything on your first day, like some people do from Cusco if they start there, that's why hotels have oxygen there. That's why they have the coca
Wow.
tea, the
Yeah.
coca leaves. And I did try chewing the coca leaves. Not for me. It was like eating dry tea leaves, and it just with a strong cup of coffee. You get a little buzz from it. Just didn't seem to do anything. But the coca de mate, the coca tea, really helped. Really settles your stomach, and then pounding the water as often as you possibly can will really get you into good shape. So those are a couple of activities that I want to suggest for Ollantaytambo. Walk around the town, talk with people. You can do a town tour if you want. If you're into the history, if you want the dates, the facts, there's a lot of things. And then definitely go to the fortress. It is just remarkable. It's restored in across the valley in the distance from the fortress. You're going to see another component of these towers. They're actually silos, and they were built by the Incans. They were granaries, so they would house all of the grain harvested from the area would be stored there.
Okay.
And when I asked why they weren't connected to the fortress, because it would make sense that why isn't it in the fortress so you could protect what you have? The reason they put it so high up into this mountain was because the air currents are high there, so it keeps the birds away from eating the grain, which I
Mm.
thought was ingenious, but just a little interesting tidbit there. But when you see the original architecture, they're untouched. Just really impressive. And then there's a face that's carved into the mountainside near the granaries, and really
Mm.
interesting. And then, so for your evening meal, I would suggest going to a local place called Inca's Tower. And I would go before sunset because it's a small restaurant with a beautiful 360-degree view in the upper level of it. As the sun is setting, you can see the fortress down where the train station is, and then you can see
Right.
the entire town of Ollantaytambo. And very good food there. Excellent, authentic food there as well. Might even be your first introduction to cuy, which I don't know if you tried guinea pig when you were there.
I haven't been to Peru yet, so I have not.
Oh, okay, okay. I
Guinea
did try
pigs, I
it.
have not eaten them. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have Trixie as a class pet in my classroom, but I did not do the fried version where you see the entire rodent splayed out and is smiling at you, or actually a screaming pose on his face, because we don't do a lot of fried food, especially when we travel. But I had some that was a tapa, and it was almost like a barbecued guinea pig, but it tastes like thigh meat chicken to me. But it was when in Peru, I broke my meat fast and I had to try it, but that was it. My wife wanted nothing to do with it. She wouldn't even take pictures. She said it was sacrilege to our children who had guinea pigs as pets. But
Well, the other thing that I'm noticing about Ollantaytambo in terms of a feature of the architecture is the terraces, that there are terraces going up the hillsides, I think towards the fortress. Am I in the
yeah,
right direction?
yeah, there's a little dip between the town and the fortress. It'll probably take about 10 minutes to walk there with an indigenous market in between the two. But
Got it.
yes, everything is terraced, just like kind of Machu Picchu with the
Yep.
almost coming to a pyramid shape. Interesting though, every one of the fortresses, or actually all of the Incan ruins, are in the shape of something. The Inca
Mm.
trilogy was the condor, the puma, and the snake.
Okay.
Obviously, the condor is heaven, the puma is the earth, and the snake, of course, is the underworld, the world of the dead. Snake always gets the bad rap, but all of the Incan ruins are in the shape. Pisac is in the shape of a bird, a partridge. Ollantaytambo is in the shape of a seated llama. And when I shape, I
Huh.
always say if you're viewing it from above. And Cusco is in the shape of a puma, and Machu Picchu is the condor. Just
Hmm.
interesting the way that
Did
every
not know that.
it was built with a purpose to reflect that as part of their belief system. So just a little something interesting. So that would be day two. And
Okay.
quickly moving on to day three, what we decided to do on our second day in Tatambo was to go to a non-for-profit organization called Llama Pack. And you can also look up Llama Trek or Llama Pack. And you can basically herd llamas for a half a day or a full day, or if you want to spend a couple of days, you can do that as well. We did it for an afternoon. Wonderful. You start near the rushing Urubamba River, and there's a meeting. Actually, they came and picked us up. And their goal is to reinstate the 100% genetic llama back into the Peruvian culture, because over
Huh.
years, as the horse was brought into from the conquistadors, the llama was not used anymore. And then inbreeding and breeding with alpaca, you had this watered down version of what was a work animal. They can only carry about 100 pounds, so that's why the horse really beat them out. But in terms of the horse, very expensive to maintain, to feed, care for, and they're very destructive to the environment. So there's a lot of clamor about them hiking the Inca Trail. They use horses, and they're very destructive to the Inca Trail itself, but taught us about how it's almost like a cooperative extension where they reach out and they have a family sign on. Now, these people have to walk 2 to 3 hours a couple times a week to participate with this. And it's educational training and animal husbandry about llamas, alpacas, and reinstating them. And it's working. These families that are participating are now raising llamas, and it's real cute. The little ones they call llamitas, and they're really sweet. When you see a baby llama, it's nothing cuter than that. But you get to walk up into the Andes, and you actually bring them up there, and you're herding them with your hands and walking behind, and wonderful pictures. And then they give you a lunch, and they talk about their belief system and their religion and everything else while you're having this authentic lunch and sipping on tea. But I have to tell you, you would think you're in cast of The Sound of Music. You're looking at these beautiful mountains high in the Andes with a herd of llamas right next to you. And then you walk them all down at the end of it. It was just a lot of fun, and it was educational. There are a lot of reviews on TripAdvisor, mine as well. And it's a straight 5-star review. It's just if you have the time and you want to hike a nice leisurely hike into the Andes, you will not regret it for the pictures that you'll take. And it also gets you ready for where we're going next.
Okay.
So days 4 and 5 are going to be, this is showtime. This is what it's all about. If you haven't enjoyed enough already, you are prepared, acclimatized, hydrated, you've had some exercise, so now you're going to wake up on day 4 and you're going to take an early train into Aguas Calientes,
Okay.
which is the city below the citadel of Machu Picchu. So if you're
Uh-huh.
looking up Machu Picchu, some people call it Machu Picchu town. It's actually Aguas Calientes. Like, I think they have a little hot spring near there.
One would assume so from the name.
Yeah, I heard it wasn't the best thing, and we chose not to go there. But I
Okay.
also had a peculiar adventure into Machu Picchu, which if there's time, I can give you a quick version of it. But anyway, take the train there. It's about 2 hours. I would take as early a train as you possibly can. Now, you have to also consider when you're going to Peru. A lot of people suggest not going in the wet season. There's mudslides, river can swell.
When is the wet season?
Let's see, I went during our winter, so that was the dry season. It was cool, very cool and dry. So you have to, but I think when you're going to any altitude, you want to bring many layers anyway, thin layers to wear. But if you're going to go during our winter, that's their high season.
Okay.
So you might want to stay away from that anyway, just because of our footprint that we put on these sites, and also the costs are going to be egregious compared to other times of the year. But my main point is you don't want anything to get in the way of your trip. And sometimes there's flooding. The Urubamba River goes right through the Sacred Valley, right through the town of Aguas Calientes. And sometimes there could be a delay. And if you're only in Machu Picchu for a couple of days, you don't want much of a delay. And especially because when you purchase your tickets are for a specific day. And I don't know how much leeway there is if when you purchase.
And I think I'm reading that they're now for a specific time as well.
They are.
Okay.
They are.
A
They
recent
have.
change.
It's a recent change, Chris, over the past few years because there are some climatic reasons as well. Some weather-related have damaged some of the site, and then most of it is due to our footprint that we apply. They used to allow 2,500 people a day. I think it's down to about 2,000, but you can't go for the whole day. You can only go for half. My point being, going for 2 days, you're playing the odds. You're going to be able to see it twice, hopefully. If for some reason you can't get there or something else, at least you got to see it once. So that's why I like to build it in there, because you don't want an opportunity where you're not going to see it at all. And there are times when I happened to go there during there was a municipal strike and the trains weren't running. So that was a little wrench thrown into our system, which is my crazy story for later if we have time. But get there early. I would suggest bringing your luggage directly to your hotel and dumping it off, have them secure it for you, get your ticket to go up on the bus. And the bus is just a serpentine terraced ride, but you have to get in queue, and that queue can extend quite a bit because everybody with that time slot wants to get there. So your first day in Aguas Calientes, you're going to get the afternoon ticket to go into Machu Picchu.
And you say get the afternoon ticket. I'm assuming, or I was assuming, that I have my ticket for when I'm going to see Machu Picchu before I get there, weeks ahead or months ahead. Is that not correct?
My suggestion is 6 months ahead. As soon as you can on the calendar, whatever their calendar date opens up, that's when you book your ticket. And later on, I have a sequence of what to do and when. But definitely secure your ticket. So that day that you're going to leave Ollantaytambo and go to Aguas Calientes, you're going to check in and leave your things, get all of your supplies ready, have them pre-packed in your backpack, and you're going to go down. Because I don't think you can pre-order your bus ticket. I think you have to go there and buy it. And it's a real simple thing to do. Aguas Calientes, a quick synopsis. Cute, funky little tourist town, tends to be a little more expensive. It looks almost like a shanty town because it's built right on either side of the Urubamba River. So everything's stilted up and terraced. With anytime you look up, that's where Machu Picchu is. You can always gaze up at it, which is cool. And lots of fun restaurants. I would describe it as like a backpacker's paradise. You're going to have a lot of hikers, a lot of people coming in from the Inca Trail who have just walked for 5 to 7 days. Birders, you're going to have a lot of people, naturalists that are there for a multitude of reasons besides going to the Citadel. But a real fun town. And again, you can also stay at a place as much as you want to spend Or if you want to do a hostel for $9, you could do that as well with everything in between. But it tends to be pricey. Really cute market there. I would suggest buying your things in Cusco on the way out, unless you see something you can't pass up, because why do you want to carry these things throughout your trip anyway? And
Yep.
trust me, city to city, everything is it's the same t-shirts, the same woven purses and pillowcases, everything that you can imagine, no matter where you go. If you're in Cusco, you'll see t-shirts for Machu Picchu, don't worry. Or you can buy it on Amazon if you needed to. But why bring that stuff home or all the way on your trip? Anyway, so that's your first day. You get there and then you spend the first afternoon in Machu Picchu, and then everybody lines up at the end and you take your queue back down into Aguas Calientes. Just stay to the side, take the last bus down when you're to that point. But when you get there and you walk into there's a front gate, and you bring your passport with you because you have to show your passport with your ticket to verify your entrance. You're going to walk into it, and when you turn the corner, there it is. It's one of the most remarkable sights. You're, as an avid traveler, even if you're not a history buff of ancient civilizations, when you turn that corner, and I'm getting goosebumps right now describing it to you, Chris, is when I walked in and I saw the Sistine Chapel, and I saw the size of it was just something that I wasn't prepared for. And when you see Machu Picchu, it's emotional. People were wiping tears in their eyes. It's just emotional to see it because you finally got there. And it is truly remarkable to see it. So you could spend that first day, I would suggest just focus on the Citadel, because the second day is when you're going to go up to the Sun Gate and do your long walk. So just focus on the Citadel.
Well,
There's
and
guides
assume
there.
I don't know, or that our listeners don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. The Citadel is that iconic picture
Yep.
with Machu Picchu Mountain. And there's, I can't pronounce the other one. It's either High-End Picchu or Y-End. There's two mountains, and you know the iconic
Yep.
picture. That is the backdrop that you see the entire time you're there. So below it are the ruins, and that's what they call the Citadel. I apologize for not explaining that.
Okay.
So the Citadel is where the temples are and the housing was, wherever they think part of it was actually like a religious retreat area. And it's all terraced. You want to spend some time walking around there and just soak it up. Take your pictures, but please spend some time not looking through the lens of your camera. Look at the Andes Mountains that you can see for miles and miles, because now you're on the border of where the Andes meet the jungle. So now the Andes are full of vegetation, and you can see crystal clear blue skies. If you get there early in the morning, the next day, you can actually get there before the clouds part, and you can actually see it unfold before your eyes. A couple of friends of ours did the hike, which some people want to do, where you climb Machu Picchu Mountain and you climb the other one. I would suggest you don't do that. You're on all fours, squeezing through areas. And after a few hours, when you get to the top, what you're doing is looking down on the Citadel. You're not seeing the iconic view of Machu Picchu. So a lot of people felt it was a feat they wanted to accomplish, but they regretted spending the time doing it because they weren't rewarded with the view when they got to the top. And you have to have a special permit ticket to do that. And you have to go up with a guide anyway. But there's so much climbing and walking on this trip to begin with.
Well, let's talk about that. How much climbing and walking, just for people to know whether this is something they can or should do, or what time in their life they need to do it. The way you described it, it sounded like I took a bus up and then I just walked in, but I don't think that's quite what you meant.
Actually, it is. Yeah, you
Is it?
might
Okay.
walk up a couple of flights of stairs from where the bus drops you off, but then you're right at the level of the Citadel. Once you walk in, give your passport and your ticket, and you walk right in. If you don't want to do any walking, you could stay right around the Citadel the entire time. There isn't the climbing and the walking there.
I want to go down from the Citadel, and then I'm going to have to go down and then walk back up again. But I'm now at, I think, 7,900 feet or something like that. I'm lower
Yeah.
down than I was when I
Yeah,
was at...
exactly. Yeah, I
yeah,
think
okay.
that Aguas Calientes is about 7,500 or so, and I think Machu Picchu is about 8,000 feet. Basically same thing. But you don't want to overexert yourself. But there's paths that you can walk on. They've created an environment to where if you stay on the path, then you're fine. You're not jumping up on stones and you're not
Yep.
crawling up the side of Chichen Itza or something. It isn't that type of walking,
Which they don't let you do anymore.
But if you go to Tulum or Tikal in Guatemala, you can climb up them. I guess to your point.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
You should consider when you're planning this trip, and you're going to be planning 6, 7 months out, that's your opportunity to do some walking. And that's all you have to do to prepare for this. You don't have to join a gym. You don't have to get a membership and have some personal trainer for this. You don't. I was glad I did it when I did, because we're very active people and we will do 8 to 10 miles a day. My knees and back are starting to tell me otherwise. But there are all walks of life, all abilities and ages, from children. Probably not the most interesting place for kids, the young kids to go to, but people travel with kids all the time. Children to senior citizens. We walked with a gentleman from California, and he was 78, and I was huffing and puffing more than he was. When you factor in the altitude and the physical exertion, because you are walking quite a bit, or not, you don't have to. You're taking transportation, taking a taxi, a colectivo, you're taking the bus to queue to get up to the top. But if you're happy with that, you're fine. I would just suggest to get out there and walk and get yourself into better shape so that you're ready for the trip, because you don't want limitations. But certainly, if you have a bad knee or so, you can do this. Everybody can do it. No one should be left out of this. It's not like you're on a safari and you're out in the bush for 6 or 7 hours in a Jeep. You're not. You go at your own pace. There's no rush. But you're there for that half day. So take your pictures. There's llamas walking around. Hire a guy for $10 if you want. I'm not the type of person that needs all the dates, the facts, the figures, the names of everybody, because I do that research ahead of time, and it's enough for me. And I lose it after you're only going to retain 10% anyway from an oral lecture. I lose it. But some people like that. I don't do big bus tours and things, and I know you're not a big group tour person either. But there are tours there, and if you want to do that, you certainly can do that. Or we did our own thing. Certainly at Brahmers or Moon, or you can download, copy anything, anyone's blog, and it'll give you everything that you need to know about it, and then some. But then, so you leave, stay to the last bus, because there's nothing great waiting for you down in town besides dinner and relaxing and gearing up for the next morning. And just take your pictures as the people leave, so that it's just you and the llamas at the end, and you have your wonderful pictures of the sun setting. And then go down to town, have dinner. You might be able to get your bus ticket right then and there at the booth for the next morning. And that's why I suggest doing the second day, because instead of the afternoon, now you're going to do the morning. And if you would like a walk, when you go back up to the Citadel through the gates, you go to the left and you follow the path and the signs for the Stargate. And it's about an hour and a half walk, a slow grade walk that they have taken this Inca trail and they have resurfaced it to the point to where it's walkable. But it is a little uneven. I would say get a nice pair of brand new sneakers before you go. You don't need hiking boots. You don't need the poles. You don't need any of that if that isn't your style. I did see people with flip-flops and open-toe sandals, and I did see a woman with heels. I don't know how far she got. It's probably the worst thing you could do, but you want something very comfortable. And then take the hour and a half, 2 hour-ish stroll up to the Sungate. There's a little temple area there. And when you get there, you're rewarded when you turn around with a complete view of Machu Picchu from a distance, which is very interesting to see. It's a very slight grade walk, very comfortable. You can go at your own pace. There's places to sit. And the other interesting thing about it is that it's the trailhead for those who have walked the Inca Trail from Cusco, from where they start, down near Pisac, I think. So these people have been on the trail for 5 to 7 days now, and you get to see their reaction when they turn the corner. and they see it for the first time. And it was your reaction the day before because they have walked and slept out there for days to get to this point. It's pretty interesting to see their reaction. And then if you want to, you can actually follow the stairs a little bit for a few hundred feet just to say your feet were on the Inca Trail anyway. But that will give you the experience. And then you're going to midday, your time will be done and you'll probably just miss those tours getting there anyway, which is nice. But I would say most, but probably half the people come from Cusco. And so now I wanted to talk about why I'm suggesting Ollantaytambo versus Cusco.
Right.
If you land in Cusco, or you stay there for a few days and that you start at the highest elevation, and if you're going to go for that one day or so, which most people do Machu Picchu in a day, you're talking getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now you have the effects of altitude and everything else. You've flown from Lima or where you started from originally days ago. Now you're going to squeeze in Machu Picchu with a 3-hour train ride that starts at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're going to get on the bus with everybody else. You're going to jam in there quickly. You're going to see it for 2 hours. And then your tour guide's going to say, okay, now we're going to do everything in reverse. And then you go back to Cusco again. To me, that's not how I want to see my bucket list. One of the locations I've lived to see for decades. I don't want to jam it in so quickly. So I would suggest doing the route that I did because they're also not going to see Ollantaytambo anyway if you come by Cusco because you never get off the train. You just stay right there and it brings you to Aguas Calientes. So before we get to Cusco, I want to talk about a couple of things that you should consider when preparing for, if we have a few minutes, for Machu Picchu. Sunblock. Definitely don't worry about what time of the year it is. Bring a hat and even consider a wide brimmed hat, not just a ball cap. The sun is like the altitude. It's no joke and will take a toll on you. Bring your water, even though there is a little restaurant there where you can have a drink and get a little snack or something. But pack your backpack, bring your snacks in. You're allowed to bring anything in. Bring your water. I suggest, again, your really good sneakers. Wear pants if you can. I didn't. I really don't own pants. I have just 2 pairs. I only wear shorts. And I was eaten alive up there. If you're familiar with Florida, we have what's called no-see-ums. They're the little gnats that you can't see, but you don't realize until the next day. My legs were eaten alive. So bring some form of DEET, whatever your body can tolerate, because you're going to need it. You won't see them, but you'll pay for it, even if you have pants and long sleeves. Dress in light layers.
And this is the first time you ran into that on that trip. It wasn't like you needed it back in.
That was it. I think we did put some on when we went on the llama pack or the llama trek there. We did have it then. And enough snacks for your time there. You can also buy something if you want. A little insider tip for you. There is a little table, which kind of looks like, Chris, probably your grandmother's phone table, a little wooden table. It's right below the restaurant. And there's a little square area, just a little seating area. And there's a table there, and it has an ink pad and a stamp. And it's a Machu Picchu stamp that you can stamp your passport with. So make sure you get your prize when you go there and stamp your passport. But I guess I would urge you to, when you're there, don't just focus on those photographs. Sit, reflect, think about why this area was built, why it was hidden from the conquistadors, why it was so-called discovered again by, was that Bingham, I think in 1911 or so. It was a secret, and they kept it a secret for a reason, but now it's your time to enjoy it. Don't just look through the lens of your phone. And also, when you're taking pictures, be very careful. I saw someone carried in a stretcher. Oftentimes, and this does happen, people taking their selfies, they go to the edge, they go as far as you can go, and you can wander around at your leisure. So there's no one telling you you can't go here or you can't go there. And some people, they like that picture with the big drop below, because when you look over the edge, if you want to go that far, and it's all terraced, so it's safe if you stay on the steps. But some people like to push boundaries a little bit. And you can actually look down all the way to Aguas Calientes. But if you want to take that picture and you stumble, being at the precipice of Niagara Falls, how close do you want to get that picture? So a little common sense will go a long way.
I know how far I want to get from that edge, but
me too.
My brain has a tendency to want to continue its existence.
I agree. So that kind of makes up your couple day stay in Aguas Calientes. It's a place to sleep, a place to eat, but more importantly, you're there for one reason. And hopefully going twice, you will take advantage of enough pictures, good weather, and seeing the Citadel and also all of the other spots along the way to the Sun Gate, which
Okay.
is really interesting. Yeah.
And then from here, I'm heading back down to Cusco.
Yes, yes. So that next morning, you are going to take your train. So your first ticket on Peru Rail will be from Tambo to Aguas Calientes. Your return ticket will be from Aguas Calientes to Cusco. So
Okay.
when you purchase your tickets, you're going to want to make sure that the dates and the times reflect that, because you don't want to make a mistake with that, or you'll have to hopefully purchase a new ticket. So you really want to stick to that itinerary and just double check it when you make your final purchases. You're going to go to Cusco, which was the Incan capital and throughout the entire civilization. And then it was taken by the conquistadors, and I think it was Pizarro. And then it was a Spanish settlement, stripped of its gold and its wealth, and then resurfaced. Everything was razed, but you could still see the foundations, the churches and the government buildings, and that beautiful colonial architecture from the 1500s and the 1600s. Definitely worth seeing. Cusco's a fun town because it's a blend of that authenticity, yet they have enough amenities where there's some cosmopolitan feel to it as well. And on your way out, we ended up spending 5 days there. We had a lot of fun, but wonderful places to stay. And there's no shortage of hotels of any array of prices and amenities. Same thing with restaurants. Again, we tend to go to local restaurants. But if there's anything that you want in Cusco, interesting, it sits in a valley. And architecture is great. Plaza de Armas is the main square. So that's where you're going to see your entertainment, and you're going to see families there. You're going to take a lot of pictures there with a big bronze fountain, the Andes Mountains in the distance. Certain vantage points, you can see the snow-capped mountains. And there's several views that I would suggest to go to take your pictures and to elevate yourself. Santo Domingo Bell Tower, the Mirador de San Cristobal, Bell Tower of San Cristobal Church, and the Cristo Blanco viewpoint, and that's where my wife and I walked up to. It's above the San Blas neighborhood, and you can take the panoramic view of all of Cusco by walking up there, but you will still feel the effects of the altitude. And you're going to
We've
want
gone
to take
further up.
and a lot. Yeah, I think we've gone about another 3,500 feet in elevation. But the fact that you've already been there, you've acclimatized for 5 days or so, by the time you get there, take it easy. And if you need the oxygen, do it. We didn't have to. But we did sip on the tea a couple of times. We noticed our stomach was a little bit off with the altitude sickness. But go at your own pace. Cusco is safe. We were safe by day and by night, exercising the normal practices that you would abroad and home anyway in any city. But they have something for everybody. If you want high-end dinners, if you want museums, what my wife and I are interested in, we don't last long in museums. It just becomes redundant after a while. And I know there's some people that are aghast at hearing that because there are people that love museums. We love to go to markets, especially local markets, and their indigenous markets. There's 5 or 6 of them, and they're absolutely wonderful. There's a couple that I can suggest. One is San Pedro Market, and the other one is San Blas, which is that San Blas neighborhood that is above Cusco. You're going to see that variety of produce, food, meats, cheeses. Now, it's not like a market in the United States. It is an open air market. So you have to brace yourself. You'll see animal parts that you didn't expect could be used for human consumption, hanging in all of its garish display. That took some time to get used to seeing some. There were organs and things hanging in butcher shops that I still have in my night's sleep at times. But it just, the textiles and even the people selling them, it's just such an honor and a privilege to be there and be a part of that. The interesting thing is the Quechua, when they come down to sell their wares, oftentimes women, they'll have a very large blanket and they'll put everything they have in these blankets.
Right.
And then they put them on their shoulders and they walk it down for miles and to lay it out on the sidewalk, only to pack it up and do the same thing. But you'll see produce. It's just interesting to go through it. And if you love taking pictures, you'll see all sorts of root vegetables and quinoa by the giant sacks, and everything is just laid out in a very casual way. And then you can find all of your tchotchkes and souvenirs and handmade items as well. So that's where I would suggest you do your shopping. But go into the churches too. They're all open, they're all available on tours. Oftentimes, little insider tip, if you want a view of the city, go into a church and see if you can go up into the bell tower. We've actually had people bring us up for tours when there wasn't even a tour. They love to show off. They're very proud people, and they take pride in their history, their culture, their buildings, and everything you could see. That's Cusco in a nutshell, worth a couple of days. We spent 5 and loved it. And then that was our exit. We spent our very last night, which would be for you or as a listener, day 8. So that's you're going home. You're going to take an afternoon flight out of Cusco, spend a night in Lima in a name brand hotel near the airport because it's a drive from Miraflores. And then you're going home that next day. So that's a lot in 1 week.
Yeah, and we're over the hour mark here, so we're going to
Okay.
start to tie this up. But before we get to our wrap-up questions, any other tips that we should know before we head to Peru and Machu Picchu?
Yeah, some general tips, and I think that they apply whenever you travel anyway. First off, I would say that always remember when you travel to a foreign destination from the States, you are a guest in that country. And you are also an ambassador of our country. So you want to represent yourself well, but also respect the wishes and the customs of the country you're visiting, whether it's modest clothing or your actions, taking pictures, just common sense. If you're going to take pictures, oftentimes what works best is buy something from them, even if it's a piece of fruit. Ask them if you could take a picture. Oftentimes, if we buy clothing, something for our grandchildren, we'll ask if we could take a picture of that clothing with the person that's selling it. No one has ever said no. Same thing with if we buy an artifact, a mask or something for home. We always ask the artist to be in a picture. But just be cognizant of that. Think of yourself being home and someone walking up to you and putting a phone in your face, taking pictures. I would suggest, again, just visit the churches, visit the markets, just for the architecture, the frescoes, the artifacts that you're going to see. And also, again, it's that tapestry that you're going to gain from being in an indigenous market or a local market, depending on what country you're in. I say to your service providers, tip well, tip everybody and tip well. It is their livelihood. A lot of people aren't paid by the hour, they're paid by their tips, and actually put it in their hand and say thank you. It definitely goes a long way. Limit your alcohol, be wary, do your research and your preparedness ahead of time, and your caffeine for the climate in terms of the altitude. Consider when you get there, getting a prescription of Cipro. They sell it in the pharmacy. It's usually $5 or so. Ciprofloxacin. That way, if you do encounter some type of stomach problem, you already have it in your hand. My doctor gives me a prescription to take with me, and we have had to use it a couple of times. And just not to get too personal, but some people will bring Imodium. But remember, if you have a stomach issue and you take Imodium, that keeps everything in. My doctor said it's a cork, I guess, if that gives you a good visual. But otherwise, Cipro.
I'm not sure I wanted a good visual for that, but that's okay.
That's as far as we'll go. Be conscious about what you're eating. I would suggest not drinking the water, but drink anything that comes out of a bottle. And just remember, you're there to see, to experience, and to participate. Just be very careful of what you eat. Because if you have 7 or 8 precious days and 3 of them are spent within the sight of your bathroom, it really means you're going to miss out quite a bit.
It's not going to be memorable in the way that you're hoping for.
No, and as travelers, Chris, I know we've all been there, but you have to make the effort. And if it means it might be down a pound or 2 by the time you get home, but be careful what you eat. Think of where it comes from. If you're choosing to eat from street food, street stalls, and yes, those are positives as well, but we just choose not to. Brush your teeth with bottled water as well. Be careful when you're shampooing and taking a shower because you're using the same water. Pisco Sour is Peru's national drink. I would say if you have to experience, because it is made with crushed ice, you know where they make their ice from, the same water you shouldn't be drinking. And it's also made with egg whites. So just be very careful and consider that. What they can eat is a lot different from what our American stomachs are used to. So no matter what destination you go to, my advice would be just to ease into the diet and just be cognizant of what you're choosing to eat. But I guess I'll leave the discussion with prepare well in advance, buy your tickets in advance. I would buy your Machu Picchu tickets first. Once you secure those, buy your train tickets. After you do that, then you can buy your airfare and finally your lodging after that. So just piece it together with what is most important, because you don't want to get on the site and find out that there's nothing available, because the tickets will go. And I remember buying them in December, maybe right after the first of the year. And then we ended up going in June. They actually show you the number of tickets left on the secure site. But the last thing I'm going to leave you with is take your time, sit at squares, people watch, talk to people when you can, soak it all up because you might not be back again. And if you can learn a few words in Spanish, that would benefit you greatly, because the farther you go from Cusco, the less English is spoken. This is not Europe where everybody learns English in school. And then you also have to remember that many people, especially at the markets, they don't even speak Spanish. They speak Quechua. And another thing to keep in your memory vault is speaking English louder and slower still does not help them if they don't speak English. Go on Duolingo for a month.
Well, that's disappointing.
Go on for a month and pick up some phrases, even if they laugh. I've done Duolingo now for 3 years, and my Spanish is actually increased, and I do pretty well. But I can speak tourist Spanish, and they can speak tourist English. So between the two, you do well. But make an effort, even if it's a hello or a thank you. When I went to Morocco, I wasn't going to learn Arabic, but I picked up about 10 words, and it really breaks the ice, and they really appreciate you making the effort.
I just wrote about this in the Amateur Traveler newsletter with my very limited Turkish, and the smiles I got from just greeting people with a few good morning, hello things.
It's as simple as that. Absolutely. Yeah, just look up the nuances of the country too, because there's things that you might not be used to.
I still have to edit this show, so I'm going to try and wrap it up.
Okay, sorry about that.
If you're standing in the prettiest spot, am I standing someplace different than the picture that I'm picturing in my head, or where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Okay, I would say the prettiest spot that I recall is in the balcony area of that hostel Iske in Ollantaytambo. And I'm looking across from me, and I was watching the sun set behind the Andes Mountains, and I distinctly recall the shade of colors that went from the sky to the fortress and the stones, and just how organic it was with the colors, the time, the place. So I would say Ollantaytambo.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Peru.
Only in Peru can you walk up a flight of stairs and get to the top and lean over the railing and take a few deep breaths as if you just ran the mile for the Olympic trials. Yeah.
And if you had to summarize the whole experience in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
I would say colorful.
Okay.
I would say magical. And I would say transcendent. Excellent. Because there is no place like it. It is its own location. There's no place in time that you will be other than where you are at that time.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Michael Franciosa. And Michael, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for Peru. Michael doesn't have a blog yet, but if you ever do, just let me know. We'll add it onto this episode.
I will. Yeah, I've been retired now for a couple of years, and my wife is highly encouraging me to find something to occupy my time. So I may be doing that soon. Chris, thank you very much for having me. It has been an honor to be on your show, and more importantly, to not only be a part of it, but to meet you and talk with you. I really appreciate it. I hope our paths cross again sometime.
A special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. This is my day job now, and I appreciate it. And a special thanks to Lynn Shattuck and Michael Vo, who are the latest patrons of the show. Welcome, Lynn and Michael. If you're interested in learning more about becoming a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I'm back from a quick trip to Colorado and Nebraska to celebrate my aunt's 90th birthday. Even though we talk about destinations on the show, it's not that I don't think that traveling to see people you love isn't important as well. There are some new things on the Amateur Traveler website since last we talked. We have 3 new articles. Ultimate Aruba Vacation, a guide to a perfect 4-day itinerary for your Caribbean vacation, top 15 things to do in Badlands National Park in South Dakota, and a budget-friendly Torres del Paine itinerary in Chile. Check out the blog at amateurtraveler.com. I'm off soon to go to Florida for PodFest and for the Podcast Hall of Fame induction ceremony, which I'm looking forward to. And then I'm up to in the International Media Marketplace in New York City to go talk to a lot of companies about why they should have me come to their destination. Wish me luck with that. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.